Now let's take a look at greasing the actual hammer on the machine. In order to do so, you need to make sure whatever press units we remove, which in this case we're going to remove 3 of them, so we're going to remove press units 2, 3, and 4. We need to make sure that we're not on one of those press units. So I'm going to go to my unit change function, and I'm going to go back to unit 1. That way I know where it's positioned. So I wouldn't be able to remove one, which I'm not going to anyhow. I'm going to now remove the screws from press units 2, 3, and 4. And I'm just going to set them down on the table. And now I want to put the actual punch unit towards the middle. So I'm going to now go to unit change, and I'm going to go to press unit number 3. Okay, and here's our actual hammer right here. You can see that this moves. Let's turn the power off now that we've got it in position, and we can move this hammer. And it's a cam, so you have to kind of flip it around to the left or to the right to make it go up and down. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we lubricate right where this part here meets the guides on either side. So the best way to do this, if you can, is to actually take your clips right out of the machine. So a small Phillips head screwdriver, or if you happen to have a little pick set, that works great. We want to do the top one as well. Make sure it's all the way down to get to the top one. Okay, once we take those clips out, now the entire bracket comes out, loosens up here, and what that will do is that'll make it so that this is completely free so that we can lubricate it better. So we want to drop it as far down as we can. And the first thing we want to do is clean out all of the old grease that's in here. So get all of that old grease out. Move this out of the way. I'm going to move it up, out of the way as best we can. And clean these intersections. Okay, and then do the opposite. Raise it all the way up and try and get the lower section as best you can. And while we're at it, let's clean these shafts off. Okay. Once you remove the old grease, we want to take our nice clean new grease, and and we want to put a nice layer all along the sides of the guides. Raise it up. And you want to make sure you're doing this maintenance minimum once a month. If you want to do it more frequently based on use, by all means, you're not going to hurt the machine by over maintaining this portion of it. I just want to emphasize that point. Notice I moved it up and down a few times, and now I'm just going to remove some of this excess that's along these edges here. And I don't mind getting my fingers into this a little bit. If you do, just use a Q-tip or your swab, which I was just using, the foam swab. And I want to put a little bit on this shaft because it does spin around this. And I'm also going to put a little bit inside the hole. It's going to knock some of that out when I go to put that shaft in. So I'll just wipe that off once I put the shaft back in there. Okay, now we want to reassemble this. So we're going to pull this to the lower position, pull it out, work our way until it's lined up, and you got to push it in fairly square. So we're just going to work our way back until it's all the way in. Oops, came out. Let's get it back in there. It's not going in even, so it's actually just starting to bind on itself. You just got to walk it. It's a tight tolerance. It'll go if you just walk it. There we go. Okay, now it's all the way in, and now we're just going to put our E-clips back on. So we'll take our first E-clip. And I've got enough grease on here right now where it's going to kind of hang on there from the grease. And then I'm just going to take a straight slot screwdriver, push that clip back into place. Make sure it's all the way in like that. You shouldn't see any of the little parts sticking down. You should just see the solid rim when it's in all the way. And then the same thing, make sure we pull this all the way down, and then get the top one in. Again, if there's a little bit of grease, which there should be, it'll stay in place. Make sure it's all the way in, and then I like to pull this down. So let's get this to spin, make sure it's down, and I like to spin this E-clip if we can. Now sometimes it's hard, but if we can spin this E-clip a little bit, let's try and spin it. Okay, this one's going to be a little stiff, doesn't want to spin. But if they can spin and you can get the opening facing down, I actually like to do that if I can, like this one is facing kind of more towards the bottom. That's actually preferred. And then we're just going to put these felt pads back into place. We'll get that excess little bit of grease off of there. And you can smell all that nice fresh grease in there now that it's nice and clean and well lubricated. Now, if you want, you could just take these felt pads out of there if that makes it easier for you. I don't mind them being in there. And then I'm just wiping off the real big heavy amounts of grease that are sitting along there. Now, we also, while we've got this apart like this LM guide, or lateral movement guide as we call it, okay, we want to give this a little bit of oil. So we'll take our needle oiler And we're just going to put a little bit of oil in there just to make sure that's going to stay nice and lubricated. And then what I like to do is get the machine turned back on, and I'm just going to do a couple color changes to move that back and forth a couple of times. Actually, before we do that, we do want to make sure that we get that hammer all the way up. Okay, the machine is now booted back up, and okay. All right. And all I was doing is reading the screen. It was basically telling me I had to hit the end button and the set button because it was slightly out of position because I manually moved that hammer. And that's probably going to happen because you're not going to get that hammer in the exact right position. But we do want to make sure that it's all the way up. So now I'm going to just do a couple unit changes. So I'm on 3. We'll go all the way to 6. Just make sure that your tape is not going to get caught anywhere. So we'll move this out of the way. And set. Okay, and now I'll give a few more little drops of oil up here, now that we're all the way out at the end. And then I'm going to unit change back to 1. It'll come all the way back this way. And I'll make sure that that's well lubricated with a few drops of oil as well. And now we're going to put our press units back on. So, we take our first press unit, which is the last one we took off. Again, just being careful with your tape. Set that in place. Our next one. Set it in place. And our last one. And notice, when I stopped at press unit number 1, because remember, if the hammer were there, we wouldn't be able to put that press unit on. So now we're going to just simply set our Allen head screws into each one. We don't want to tighten these yet. We need to use the jig. My hands are a little slippery. Get a little grease on them. The Allen wrench is slipping in my hand a little bit. Okay, now we'll take our press unit jig, set it in there. Now this is nice and snug. That's in the right spot. Drive those screws home. And that is how we grease the punch.